lying and duplicity and treachery.
It's not just all explosions and car chases.
Intellectual cat and mouse between MI5 and KGB.
There aren't many plot holes that aren't being filled.
Oh my God, I'm in the 70s. Untruth and half-truth and deception.
There are an awful lot of twists and turns and unexpected things that happen in the plot that make it genuinely thrilling to watch.
It completely keeps you guessing, and I think we do have something very special here.
The one thing I hope this isn't is safe. The game is a game of two halves. That sounds like a pun, but it's actually true. It's on one side, it's about Joe Lamb and his story, his revenge, because the series opens with him offering himself as an informer to the KGB. It being a trap, them killing the woman that he's offered himself up to the KGB for because he's madly in love with her. You then meet him a year later when he's trying to deal with that loss, the only person he's ever truly loved in his life, including his parents. And it's kind of, on a personal level for him, it's a revenge story. It's, at the same time, it's a Cold War thriller.
When I read the scripts, you know, I was completely engaged with it. It's a twisty plot. It's, you know, you've got a lot of great characters. You don't know who to trust. You don't know who to believe. And it's, as I say, it's led by some great characters with Joe and Daddy and Bobby. All, you know, I mean, it's a great sort of ensemble of characters. That's before it's even cast, and they're all amazing. But that's kind of, I suppose, what attracted me to it.
The ambition and the intention with the game was to do a character-led espionage show. Obviously, espionage shows and spy shows are a very familiar genre and a very kind of well-trodden territory, but I wanted to approach it from a slightly different direction and kind of in a way do a much more character-led piece, and to explore the very specific and particular pressures that work has on the characters. For example, just the notion of lying and duplicity and treachery, and how somebody has to create a kind of world and a blanket and a screen of untruth and half-truth and deception, and how that affects them.
And we wanted to have actors who we knew would be able to both take the plot seriously, take the story seriously, take the stakes that the characters are under seriously, but still give us that little entertaining twinkle that's in his writing, which is not an easy thing. Those kind of tonal shifts can be difficult for actors who are not used to playing with tone in that way. So I would say, you know, actors like Paul Ritter, who's obviously done comedy as well as drama, Victoria Hamilton, who has played some major comic roles in the theatre, Brian Cox, who will segue in his career happily from one genre to another. Those kind of actors are very experienced in playing with tone, and they're also incredibly classy actors who have a huge range.
It's quite an ensemble piece, so I like that idea. The storytelling is excellent, the scripts are very fine. Toby Whithouse and the other writers have done a great job, and just it kind of tickled my fancy, as it were.
It's an amazing cast of people, amazing actors, and they're all very different characters. They're all very kind of, their sort of trajectory through that series is very different, and they, I think as a team, they're kind of a very odd group of people, and yet, you know, if you saw them in a pub together, you'd be a bit like, all right, but somehow they work very well together. The different brains work very well together. And their different kind of motivations and their different axes that they're grinding. Yeah, I think it sort of works very well.
I think we've got such a wonderful pool of energy and talent. We've got an amazing cast and fantastic costume designer and hair and makeup, and the writing is brilliant, and it completely keeps you guessing. And I think we do have something very special here, and which is very much why I wanted to be part of it. So I think that I hope the audience will enjoy that and will respond to it and hopefully bring back memories, you know, if they've lived through this decade.
In the 1970s, specifically the era that we have set the game in, it was a very kind of volatile period politically. There was a very unpopular government, is there any other kind, in power, who had a tiny majority and were kind of hanging on by their fingernails. We just emerged from what they called the Winter of Discontent, where there was constant industrial action. We were moving into a period where the miners went on strike, and the miners going on strike meant that the power stations had to close down, which meant that there were sudden power cuts, and literally, this happened, you know, on quite a regular basis, because the country just couldn't create the electricity without the coal, and so on. So it was the 3-day week, which was they could only provide power for 3 days of the working week, and so there was a state of kind of chaos and paranoia, and there was certainly within the government, and particularly within the security services, there was a suspicion and a fear of the trade unions, because suddenly it felt as though the country was being held to ransom by the trade unions. MI5 and Special Branch used a lot of their agents to infiltrate the trade unions, partly to get intel from them about what they were planning, but also to destabilize them, and actually some particularly the Special Branch, some of their officers actually reached a very high level within the trade unions. So there was, you know, the kind of it was a very divisive and scary time for the government, because they felt as though there was a real kind of sense of paranoia. They felt as though they were on the verge of a coup.
It's very easy, even for my generation, to forget how real the fear of Russia was at that time. I spoke to my parents about it, and a lot of people of their generation, and you know, the absolute terror that at any point in time someone could hit that button and there could be a nuclear strike. And it was real, you know, that fear was real. And those public information films on the TV that you sat and watched with your family about, you know, get under the table during a nuclear strike and make sure you've got lots of tins of beans hidden. I mean, they're just terrifying in their naivety. And the fact that politically it was such a turbulent time, with the unions and everything else. There was a huge amount of political unrest and upheaval. And it was very interesting trying to get back in touch with that.
There's a lot of parallels with, you know, what's going on in the world and at the moment, and it's interesting to see, you know, nothing changes. And I just think it's really good writing as well, which, you know, the temptation with, if you're doing a sort of spy thing, is to make everything incredibly sort of smooth and glamorous and quite implausible. And I think a lot of what happens in the game is quite plausible, and there aren't many plot holes that aren't being filled, and I like that. It's very helpful for actors when you're not asked to do something and you think, well, would this really happen? Or it doesn't take a great leap of faith, I don't think, a lot of the time.
Constantly everyone was talking about how we make sure that the show delivers 1972 what it is, and actually I think the big thing, there's two big things, is what people are wearing. What people are wearing instantly tells you that you're in a different period, and bizarrely I think for me the action vehicles do more than anything else. As soon as you see those cars, it just takes you back in time, and they seem so incredibly old-fashioned, and yet rather upsettingly they seem like cars from when I was a kid.
The design on this is one of the best. Michael's an incredible Michael Howell's an amazing designer. And I was just saying to some of the boys earlier, right down to the tiniest detail, they do it. They cover it, and they cover all angles. And the art department on this job, it's just incredible. I mean, the thing is, you go into the fray, and it's populated with supporting artists and who all look amazing. And you walk in, and you just go, 60% of my job's done.
It's so exciting, it's so wonderful, so detailed. The level of detail and thought is so thrilling to see and to be part of. And suddenly you are transported, because you are transported back to that time and to that era and to that kind of world. And so suddenly kind of seeing it, in the flesh. And it was, I have to say, it was completely different to how I'd imagined it in my head. I'd imagined something a little more kind of wood panelled and sort of more like a kind of gentleman's club. But actually, what Michael has done, I think, is so much better. It's so much more. It has much more kind of panache than I'd envisaged.
The greatest things in the fray for me are when the camera's behind you and using your shoulder, a bit of dirty foreground and going on to somebody else, and you can just sit there and you can look at somebody and you can look at cast members there with the glass behind them in the office, and all the essays behind milling away on their typewriters and the noise of the typewriter. And as far as you're concerned, it's just 1972.
Well, certainly the idea was that you could see from one set to another. So where you have the meeting room, rather than just being a room set somewhere in the building, it is actually glass panelled. So you see this sort of beehive of energy and work outside. And we've done it so that all the sets really link, so that from Daddy's office you can then sort of move out into the space and actually move down into the next floor and then into the meeting room. And so it just gives us sort of much more sort of colour and movement in the product. If you're doing something Elizabethan, you can probably get away with a lot more. But when you're doing something so specific to the 70s, the fact is that people remember it. So you have to be really spot on when you're looking at things. Decimalisation had just come in, so all the coins that we needed, we couldn't just use the new decimalised coins. They had to be bright, shiny coins because they were absolutely brand new. So there's all those little details that you really have to look at. And it is that our whole idea of looking and finding and turning up things, that it's extraordinary where you do, what you do come across. Some of our wallpapers we've actually found in America and from people who hold original stock. So we bought some things from there, other wallpapers we found in England and so on. So it is a case of hunting for all these different things.
It's an amazing design. It's so kind of detailed. Even when you're waiting to, turn over, you take a look at all this different gadgets and stuff they've got just lying around everywhere. It's a massive job. You kind of think it's the technology and the way they've laid everything out is incredible. It's so detailed, and really helps us as actors because it gives you a real sense of how things worked and it's basic, but it's kind of, it's really cool having that around you. It really helps, almost more than research to have that around you because you can see it and you can feel what it would like.
We've used a lot of glass in all the sets, so that you always, quite often you're shooting through glass and you're looking through glass, and it's a sort of play on the fact that the main operation is called Operation Glass, but also nothing really is as it seems, so there's also this whole thing of distortion and reflection that comes in.
A lot of people within the kind of secret security service, they would marry with other people within the service. And even within that, husband and wives would never ever talk about the particular assignments and missions that they have. There was no kind of in the way that we all kind of, people talk about that work to their partners and so on. Within the Secret Service, you can't do that. Even to the point where if you're working at home and you have documents or whatever, and your wife or husband comes in, you have to cover them up. So there's a kind of instantly there's a secret world. There are secrets and there are things hidden even from your partner. And I found that fascinating because I wanted to explore the effect that has on a relationship and the effect that has on the individual.
It's quite nice when you I've worked on lots of period dramas which are kind of, period costume dramas, and it's horse and carriages, and that feels like a whole world away. And it's really nice to do something which is it's within living memory, and it seems so crazy that you can't just pick up your mobile phone and ring people, and actually it's not very long, it's not very far away, and I think it's nice for an audience just to really remember what it was like in the not too distant past.
The part of the reason why I wanted to set it in the 1970s was that we had our technology at that time was very, very limited, and from a dramatist's point of view, that's really exciting because that creates challenges, but from those challenges actually you can create narrative and you can create story. It was a very kind of lo-fi period. And so the weapons that MI5 and MI6 and Special Branch had to employ, they didn't have kind of facial recognition software and kind of being able to kind of locate people from their mobile phone signal.
This immediate society that we live in now, where if you want someone, you can get them. You know, if you need something, you can find it out in seconds. Whereas we were dealing with people who were literally day to day had their lives on the line.
You know, all the different cop shows that we watch now on TV, they're all on the mobile phone to each other or receiving emails on their BlackBerry or whatever it might be. And our guys can't do that. If they're out on the road, they're out on the road, and if they need to ring someone up, they've got to find a phone box and they've got to hope that they answer the phone, because the person might not answer the phone, there's not even an answer phone message.
It was just completely different, and it felt vastly more dangerous as a result, and vastly more lonely as well. That when you were on your own, you really were on your own if you were out on a case or being pursued by someone. So all of that, I think, really adds to the tension in the series, because we've forgotten what it is to be without the internet, to be without mobile phones, to be, you know, alone and coping with a life-threatening situation.
You know, their victories and their methods were intuition and guesswork and kind of understanding the sort of three-dimensional chess game of espionage. And I found that really interesting. And as I said, from a dramatist's point of view, it makes it more gratifying. It makes it slightly more difficult because you can't play those kind of narrative get-out-of-jail cards that you can with, you know, which technology often allows you to do. So, like I say, you have to rely on the kind of the characters kind of really digging into the complexity of the problem and using their brain power and using their intellect to solve the mysteries.
Of course, these aren't real-life characters, but MI5 exists, and the Cold War existed, and the 70s existed, and there was an awful lot of factual stuff that was there to find out if you wanted to. I did quite a lot of research into women in the 70s politically, you know, just what it was to be an adult woman in the 70s. And I read Stella Rimington's autobiography, because that was very interesting, just about a woman moving in this man's world. But then I think after a certain amount of research, you just have to stop and look at the script that you're working with, and that's when it then comes down to how rich is the character that you've been given to play. And the great thing about this script is that you could do all that research and have all that as a sort of platform supporting you, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is to make these people come alive, and Toby writes such rich characters that was really easy to do. That was the easy bit.
Every character has a point of view, and that's the sign of a good writer to me, and the sign of good writing is when, no matter how big or small the role, or how long or short the role is, you know, in for a day or in for 2 days, that it has a distinct point of view.
It's got the complicated, twisty plot that keeps you guessing and trying to figure out what's going on, but at the same time, it really has a strong atmosphere of the period and, you know, and of that world, and it's got, you know, interesting characters, lots of interesting characters with, you know, interesting relationships with each other, and again, to be able to balance the twistiness of the plot and the atmosphere of all that, I think is something that I think will really stand to the show, and I think that it'll you know, win a lot of fans for us.
Hopefully it's challenging. Hopefully on some level it makes people have to work a bit, but get a payoff for that work. You know, that dual story of thriller, revenge love story, you know, it deals with human emotions and social kind of issues, and hopefully that challenges people. The one thing I hope this isn't is safe.